They humiliated his ex-wife in court. Seconds later, her billionaire secret and lost love stunned everyone. The courtroom silence. The fluorescent lights hummed above the packed courtroom as Nora Sadek smoothed her simple navy dress, her hands steady despite the storm brewing around her. Across the aisle, her ex-husband Rafiq Mansour sat flanked by 3 attorneys in expensive suits, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed somewhere above her head, anywhere but her eyes. "Mrs. Sadek," the lead attorney began, his voice dripping with practiced disdain. "Or should I say Ms. Sadek now? Let's be honest about what you brought to this marriage," he paced before the judge, gesturing dramatically. "My client worked tirelessly to build a respectable career as an architect. He provided the home, the stability, the vision. And you dabbled in minor investments, stayed home, contributed nothing substantial." Whispers rippled through the gallery. Nora felt the weight of every judgmental stare, but she remained still, her expression serene. Her own lawyer, a young woman named Hannah, glanced at her with barely concealed frustration. Nora had forbidden her from revealing anything yet. Rafiq shifted in his seat, his mother leaning forward to whisper something sharp in his ear. 6 months ago, she'd been the one to push for this divorce, convincing Rafiq that Nora was holding him back, that he deserved someone who matched his ambitions. Now she sat there, victorious, watching Nora's public dismantling. "Your Honor," the attorney continued, "we're asking for a fair division of assets, which means my client retains the home, the savings, and his architectural firm. Ms. Sadek can leave with her personal belongings and perhaps a modest settlement for her time." The judge, an older man with kind eyes, looked at Nora. "Ms. Sadek, do you wish to respond to these characterizations?" Nora stood slowly, her heart pounding but her voice calm. "Not yet, Your Honor. But soon." Rafiq finally looked at her then, confusion flickering across his handsome face, the face she'd once traced with her fingers in the darkness of their bedroom, whispering promises neither of them kept. "Very well," the judge said, puzzled. "We'll hear from the petitioner's witnesses. The hidden empire." The testimony droned on for another hour, Rafiq's colleagues praising his talent, his mother describing Nora as a pleasant but unremarkable woman, his brother claiming she'd been a financial burden. Nora watched it all with an expression that unnerved Rafiq more than tears would have. She looked almost peaceful. Finally, the judge turned to her lawyer. "Ms. Hannah, does your client have any evidence to present?" Hannah stood, and Nora caught the slight smile on her lips. "Yes, Your Honor. Substantial evidence." She placed a leather portfolio on the table, then connected her laptop to the courtroom's display screen. The first document appeared, a corporate registry showing Nora's name as primary shareholder of Meridian Holdings. Rafiq's lawyer laughed. "Your Honor, this is clearly Meridian Holdings," Hannah continued calmly, "which owns controlling shares in 6 technology startups, 2 of which went public last year. Combined valuation, $1.3 billion. The laughter died. Rafiq's face went pale. Document after document filled the screen. Luxury hotels in 3 countries. A pharmaceutical research company. The investment firm that had recently made headlines for its innovative approach to sustainable energy. And there, buried in the fine print of the architectural magazine Rafiq read religiously, the venture capital fund that had quietly bankrolled the city's most prestigious building projects, including 2 that Rafiq himself had worked on. "This is impossible," Rafiq's mother gasped, gripping her son's arm. "The modest investments your client dismissed," Hannah said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "began with a $50,000 inheritance Nora received the year before their marriage. She never touched Rafiq's income. Every investment, every company, every dollar, she built it herself, working quietly while your client slept. While his family mocked her for staying home, she was changing industries." The judge leaned forward, studying the documents an assistant had brought him. "These are all verified." "Every single one, Your Honor. And there's more." Hannah clicked to another screen. "The home Rafiq claims as his own? Purchased with funds from Nora's portfolio. The car he drives. Nora's money. Even the loan he took to expand his firm 3 years ago, denied by every bank until Nora quietly guaranteed it through one of her holdings." Rafiq stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. "Nora, what? Why didn't you?" "Sit down, Mr. Mansour," the the judge said firmly. But Nora finally spoke, her voice soft yet clear. Because I loved you, Rafiq. And I knew the truth would destroy us. The sacrifice revealed. The judge called for a recess, but Nora asked to continue. She stood at the front of the courtroom, and for the first time in months, she let herself look directly at Rafiq, really look at him. We met at that seaside cafe, she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. You were sketching buildings on napkins, talking about how you designed structures that made people feel safe. I fell in love with your passion, your humility. You didn't care that I came from money, you never asked about my family's wealth, never wanted it. Rafiq's eyes glistened. His mother tried to interrupt, but the judge silenced her with a look. When my grandmother left me that inheritance, I invested it quietly. I had a gift for seeing patterns, understanding markets. It grew, and kept growing. But Rafiq, you were struggling to prove yourself to your family, to establish your firm in a competitive field. I saw how your father's shadow weighed on you, how you needed to build something that was yours. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to old messages, and Hannah projected them on the screen. Texts between Nora and Rafiq's mother from 2 years ago. Your son deserves better than a wife who outshines him. Nora, you're making him look small. If you truly love Rafiq, you'll step back. The courtroom went silent. Rafiq turned to his mother, betrayal written across his face. I tried to ignore it, Nora continued. I hid my success, dressed simply, never corrected anyone who assumed I was just a housewife. When you got that major project last year, Rafiq, remember how happy you were? You said it proved you didn't need anyone's help. Rafiq nodded numbly. It was my fund that convinced the developers to hire your firm. I sat in that meeting, watched you present, and knew you'd never forgive me if you learned the truth. So I stayed silent. She turned to his family. But then you all decided I wasn't enough. You pushed for this divorce, convinced Rafiq I was holding him back. And I realized, I could never win. If I revealed my success, you'd call me manipulative, say I'd controlled him. If I stayed quiet, I'd be worthless. So I chose to leave, to let Rafiq believe he'd outgrown me, rather than watch your family scheme to access my wealth. A tear rolled down Rafiq's cheek. Nora, I never knew. I know, she whispered. That was the point, the aftermath. The courtroom erupted. Rafiq's lawyer immediately requested a recess to re-evaluate our position, which everyone understood meant withdrawing their claims entirely. His mother sat frozen, her carefully constructed narrative shattered. His brother had already slipped out, unable to face the humiliation. The judge, looking between the evidence and the broken family before him, shook his head. This is the most unusual case I've seen in 30 years. Mr. Mansour, your petition for asset division is denied. In fact, given that Ms. Sadek funded the majority of your marital assets, you should consider yourself fortunate she's not countersuing. I'm not, Nora said quietly. I never wanted his money. I just wanted to be free. As the judge dismissed them, Rafiq tried to approach her, but his lawyer pulled him back, whispering urgent advice. Nora gathered her things slowly, Hannah squeezing her shoulder in support. You were right to wait, Hannah murmured. The truth was worth more than any argument I could have made. In the courthouse hallway, reporters had somehow gotten wind of the story. Cameras flashed as Nora emerged, but she walked through them without comment, her head high. Behind her, she heard Rafiq's mother's sharp voice trying to spin the narrative, claiming they'd always known, always been proud. Nora pushed through the heavy doors into the afternoon sunlight. The steps were crowded with people from the courtroom, some looking at her with newfound respect, others with naked curiosity. She descended slowly, pulling out her phone to call a car. Nora, wait! Rafiq's voice carried over the noise. She turned to see him pushing through the crowd, his tie loosened, his usually perfect hair disheveled. For a moment, she saw the man she'd fallen for, vulnerable, real, searching. But she also saw his mother following close behind, already calculating, already planning how to salvage this. Please, Rafiq said, reaching the bottom of the steps. Please let me explain. Let me apologize. Nora looked at him, This man she'd loved enough to hide herself for, and felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. "You don't owe me an apology, Rafik. You never knew. That was my choice. But my family." "Your family did what families do when they smell money and power. They protected their interests. The question is, what do you want?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to answer in front of the watching crowd. Nora's car pulled up. "Goodbye, Rafik," she said softly, and walked away. Finding home again. 3 days later, Nora sat at the wooden table of Café Mizan, the same seaside place where she and Rafik had met 7 years ago. The salt air mixed with the scent of cardamom coffee, and the afternoon light painted everything gold. She'd come here to remember who she was before everything became complicated, before love turned into secrets, before protection became prison. She was sketching absently in a notebook, not business plans for once, just the curve of the waves, the flight of gulls, when someone cleared their throat. Rafik stood there, alone this time, his hands in his pockets. He looked tired, older somehow. "I remembered you used to come here when you needed to think. I hoped." Nora gestured to the empty chair. Whatever came next, she could handle it. He sat, ordering tea with shaking hands. For a long moment, they just existed in the space they'd once shared so easily. "I left my mother's house," he said finally. "Moved into a small apartment near the port. She called me ungrateful, disloyal. My brother said I was throwing away family for a woman who'd humiliated us." "And what do you say?" Nora asked gently. "I say I've been blind. Not just about your money, about everything. You loved me enough to make yourself smaller, and I was too proud to notice. I let my insecurity, my need to prove myself, create a space where you couldn't be honest. And when my family pushed for the divorce, some part of me, I was relieved. Because being with you made me feel inadequate, and I never stopped to ask why." Nora's fingers tightened around her cup. "And now? Now I understand that you weren't making me small, I was making myself small by measuring my worth against yours. You built an empire in silence while I built buildings with noise, and both were valuable. I was just too scared to see it." The waves crashed against the shore in their eternal rhythm. A child's laughter carried from somewhere nearby. "I don't know if we can fix this," Nora admitted. "Too much has broken." "I know," Rafik reached across the table, palm up, an offering, not a demand. "But maybe we don't fix it. Maybe we start new. No secrets this time, no protecting each other's pride. Just honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." Nora looked at his hand, remembering all the time she'd held it while hiding her truth. Then she thought about the courtroom, about finally being seen completely, about the strange freedom in having nothing left to hide. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Not a promise, not yet, but a possibility. "Tell me something true," she said. Rafik smiled, that genuine smile she'd fallen for years ago. "I'm terrified. Of your success, of my failures, of not being enough. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been if I'd just been brave enough to stand beside you instead of in front of you." "Okay," Nora whispered. "Then tell me another truth. I never stopped loving you. Not even when I should have." The afternoon stretched around them, full of uncertain hope. They talked until the sun began to set, painting the sea in shades of amber and rose. They talked about his architecture and her investments, about his family's toxicity and her loneliness at the top, about the ways they'd both been wrong and the ways they'd both been hurt. When Rafik finally walked her to her car, he didn't try to kiss her, didn't make grand promises. He just said, "Can I call you tomorrow?" And Nora, feeling lighter than she had in years, replied, "Yes." Love, she realized, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect understanding. It was about showing up honestly, day after day, brave enough to be vulnerable and strong enough to see each other clearly. Maybe they'd find their way back. Maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time, they'd be trying with open eyes and truthful hearts. Lessons from the heart. True love never asks you to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. It celebrates your light and grows stronger in its glow. The greatest gift you can give someone isn't protection from hard truths, but the trust that they can handle reality with grace. Pride destroys more relationships than honesty ever could. Vulnerability is not weakness but the foundation of genuine connection. Love worth keeping isn't found in perfection or pretense, but in the courage to stand beside each other, fully seen and deeply known.